Star Wars is my favorite franchise. I've loved this series as long as I can remember, and even nowadays, as I get older, I still love it dearly, warts and all. And while I love the games, the books, and the shows as well, to me, Star Wars is most at home with the films. I do not hate any of the Star Wars films, however, there are some that I love more than others. Some have higher highs and some have lower lows. And today, I'm going to give you my ranking of the Star Wars movies. Before we start, remember that Star Wars means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Every ranking is different and every opinion is subjective. Also, we will only be covering theatrical releases, so no Ewok movies, Lego films, or holiday special. With that said, let's start at number 12 with Star Wars: The Clone Wars from 2008. Star Wars: The Clone Wars is one of the greatest Star Wars projects ever made. The show spanned 7 seasons and gave us some of the most compelling storytelling, amazing interpretations of classic characters, and completely new characters that have since become fan favorites, like Ahsoka Tano, Cad Bane, and Captain Rex. The theatrical film, however, is at the bottom of the list. Not because it's necessarily awful. The voice acting is great, the animation is decent, and it's Christopher Lee's final performance as Count Dooku. But there was no reason for this to be a theatrical film. The movie, in a nutshell, is basically several episodes of the show stitched together to fit a theatrical runtime. There's 2 main story arcs in this film: Anakin being assigned to Padawan during the Battle of Christophsis, and Jabba the Hutt's son being kidnapped. Neither of these are particularly compelling stories as far as a movie goes, however. And while the show itself is great, we forget that the first 2 seasons aren't the best, and it took time to build to something truly special. The best way I can describe this movie is awkward and unnecessary. And while Ahsoka has become one of the most beloved characters, she didn't start off that way. Fans despised Ahsoka early on, especially in this film, believing she was annoying, unnecessary, and that it didn't feel right for Anakin to have an apprentice. Thankfully, the show was amazing and Ahsoka grew and developed. The film, however, has not aged as well as the show. It's an easy skip. Up next at number 11, we have, in my opinion, the weakest film in the main saga, Attack of the Clones. I want to reiterate, I like Attack of the Clones, but of all the films, this is the one I have the hardest time rewatching. Attack of the Clones has some great stuff, but it's also the film that I find has aged with the least amount of grace. My biggest problem with Attack of the Clones is not the acting, though the acting leaves a lot to be desired. It's not the effects, many of which look horrendous if you watch the movie in high def or 4K. Seriously, this background here looks like garbage. My biggest issue with the film is the pacing. The pacing of Attack of the Clones is all over the place, jumping from slow to fast to slow to fast, while leaving too much time for things that aren't interesting or necessary to the story, and not enough time for some crucial elements that are either overlooked or not given the gravity they deserve. An example being Obi-Wan asking Windu and Yoda if they think Dooku was telling the truth about the Sith Lord being in control of the Republic. A revelation this shocking, if it were true, would be cause for immediate investigation. Unfortunately, the scene gets rid of this with Yoda dismissing Dooku as a liar. On top of all of this, the action in the third act is jumbled and weak. Seriously, the longer you watch the arena battle, the more problems pop up. Half the Jedi in the background are swinging at nothing, and once you notice it, you'll never be able to unnotice it. The duel is one of the weakest of the prequels, and the editing during said duel is on crack. Now, there are some great things about Attack of the Clones. Ewan McGregor is always great as Obi-Wan, and his comedic moments are the only ones that really land. Christopher Lee is rarely ever bad in anything he's in, and Jango Fett is a really cool villain, and his fight on Kamino and in space with Obi-Wan is amazing. But the film just doesn't hold my attention well enough, whether through good action or good writing. This movie is almost 2.5 hours, but it feels so much longer. I still watch it every so often, but it's the weakest of the main saga in my opinion. At number 10, we have The Phantom Menace. A lot of the issues I have with Attack of the Clones also apply to The Phantom Menace in terms of effects, pacing, and acting. What sets it above Attack of the Clones for me, however, is that while I don't find the overall story the most engaging, I think it has more focus than Attack of the Clones. Aside from the stuff about trade routes, treaties, and taxation, which isn't too hard itself to grasp if you pay attention, I feel like the story following Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Anakin knows to keep the primary focus on the primary story. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan help the Queen escape, they land on Tatooine and need parts, they meet Anakin, and so on. Things flow a lot smoother than they do in Attack of the Clones. I also feel that even though a lot of the CGI is very dated, most of the effects in Phantom Menace still hold up pretty well. The CGI backgrounds, especially for locations like Otoh Gunga and the Theed reactor core, still look amazing. Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon is a great role and performance, Ewan again is great as a young Obi-Wan, and even Jake Lloyd is clearly trying his best to give the performance that Lucas wanted. On top of this, Duel of the Fates is one of the greatest pieces of music in Star Wars, and the duel on Naboo is top 3 easily. Now, of course, there are huge problems with this film. While I don't despise Jar Jar, for example, way too much focus is put on him. And the thing is, if you remove him from the movie, a lot of things don't happen, which isn't a good sign when your most annoying character is crucial to the story. On top of that, while I love the pod race, the stuff on Tatooine does start to drag after a while. So, Phantom Menace is my second least favorite, but one I pop in on occasion. At number 9, we have Rogue One. This one I know is going to make a lot of people angry, but I'm going to be honest, Rogue One is only amazing because of 2 things: an incredible third act battle and Darth Vader. Remove Vader and the space battle and Rogue One would easily fall lower on my list because of a few factors. 1, the main cast are not very interesting characters. I don't find Jyn Erso a compelling lead. I found her bland and uninteresting. Cassian Andor was okay, but only really became a fully fleshed out character in his own show. Chirrut and Baze were okay and had decent chemistry. Bodhi Rook, on the other hand, I barely remember a thing about him. He left no impact on me. The only member of the main cast that I loved was K2SO. I also think that Krennic was a weak villain. The way the trailers build him up, I was expecting a real threatening villain, someone like Tarkin or Thrawn, and he started off kind of intimidating in the opening, but afterwards he feels more like a kid throwing a tantrum because his toy got taken. And then you throw him in front of Vader and he becomes a quivering mess, which, fair, we all would. But my biggest problem with Rogue One is that I knew going in that all of these main characters were going to die. It's hard to get attached to a character when you know they're going to die in an hour. It takes a lot of good writing and emotional weight to make you feel for a character that's only going to be around for a little while. Now again, the action in the third act is great. It's one of the best space battles put to screen, and by God, Vader is perfect in this movie. But those elements alone are not enough for it to be in my top 5. At number 8, we have Solo, a Star Wars story. Solo, to me, is a very easy film to watch. It's fun, it's well-paced, well-acted, well-written. The movie is like a bowl of vanilla ice cream. But that's the problem. It's good, but not great. I'll admit I wasn't really asking for a Han Solo origin movie, but for what it is, I was happy with it. It hit all the major points it needed to. Meeting Chewie, meeting Lando, getting the Falcon, the Kessel Run, all that stuff. But the film doesn't really have any big standout scenes that make me excited to go back and rewatch it. The acting is good, but nothing Oscar-worthy. The characters are good, but not the best. The effects are great, but the environments they take place in aren't super engaging to the eye. The film is just good, nothing greater. Another issue I have with the movie is the same problem I had with Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince and Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. The movie is too dark, not thematically, literally. There are so many scenes in this movie that aren't lit well, and it's so hard to make out what's going on. Now, sometimes it works. The meeting of Lando and Han, for example, is set in a dark, shady gambling ring, and the lower lighting makes for a more uncertain and dangerous atmosphere. But you can still have a darkly lit scene while maintaining visual interest. The Empire Strikes Back, for example. The first half of the Bespin duel is darkly lit with lots of shadows, but there's enough backlighting to see everything that's going on. With all that said, Alden Ehrenreich, Donald Glover, Woody Harrelson, Emilia Clarke, they all do a good job with their roles. The relationship between Chewie and Han is great, as well as Han and Lando. The action is nice, especially the train heist, and Paul Bettany as Dryden Voss gives a very chilling performance. I think what I like about Solo more than Rogue One is that Solo feels a lot more fun to me. I had a better experience watching it. So it goes just above. At number 7, we have The Rise of Skywalker. I think most people agree that The Rise of Skywalker is not the strongest film in the series, and it wasn't the best way to end the saga. And my biggest issue, aside from bringing Palpatine back, which I think was the wrong decision, is the pacing. Unlike Attack of the Clones, where the pacing would go back and forth from agonizingly slow to obnoxiously fast, Rise of Skywalker is at full throttle the entire film. Apparently, a lot of footage was cut from the final film, and it definitely shows. There are so few moments in the film where the story can take a minute to breathe and let everything sink in. The plot is constantly moving, there are too many MacGuffins, and because everything is going by so fast, it's hard to get invested in the plot. And yeah, let's talk about the elephant in the room: Palpatine's return. Now, on the one hand, Ian McDiarmid returns to the role, and you can tell he's having an absolute blast anytime he dons the robes. He has some great moments in the film, but the problem is that there was nothing building up to his return. The opening crawl says he broadcast his return to the galaxy, but they don't show it. You had to play Fortnite to hear it. And what makes it worse is that we had a perfectly good setup for Kylo to be the primary villain at the end of The Last Jedi. In this movie, he's back to square one, serving another person, which I wouldn't mind so much if the film would just take a little time to breathe and explain a few things, show what these characters are dealing with. The cinematography also suffers in this one. Give The Last Jedi some credit. The film was gorgeous to look at, with beautiful scenery, well-framed shots, and wide angles that made every environment feel grand and enormous. Rise of Skywalker just doesn't have as appealing a visual style. So that's the negative stuff. How about the positives? Well, despite the story being pretty weak, Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, John Boyega, and Oscar Isaac all give great performances, clearly giving everything they have. And despite Carrie Fisher's death, they handled Leia's role in the film beautifully, using unused footage from the previous films to make Leia's final on-screen moments count. The action is also really good, primarily during the Battle of Exegol. Lando showing up with the fleet is one of my favorite moments in the series. I also appreciate that the film gives C-3PO his time in the spotlight, being a big part of the primary mission. So yeah, Rise of Skywalker is definitely the weakest of the sequels and a pretty weak entry in the series, but there's still quite a lot to enjoy in the film. You just have to put up with some pretty frustrating pacing and story decisions. At number 6, we have The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is a great all-around Star Wars movie. It has great pacing, an engaging story, fun new characters, great effects, great action, and it was a breath of fresh air at a time when we had been without a Star Wars movie for over 10 years. The standout of the film, of course, is Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, a conflicted but powerful Darksider, and the grandson of Darth Vader. Driver knocked it out of the park with his performance, but all the other actors did a great job as well, including Harrison Ford returning as Han Solo and Carrie Fisher as Leia. However, the primary criticism levied towards the film is that its story is too similar to A New Hope. And while it's not a beat-for-beat copy, the similarities are very difficult to ignore. A lot of criticism was also given to the fact that there's another empire decades after the first one was destroyed, and that we don't see much of the New Republic and how it's run before it's destroyed. A lot of people took issue with the fact that not only did Han and Leia split up, but that Luke went into hiding. And because Han Solo was killed in this movie, we would never see Luke, Han, and Leia on screen together again. And while that is definitely a bummer, I think the overall story still works very well. It's still a fun, effective, and engaging Star Wars movie. At number 5, we have The Empire Strikes Back. This one I know is going to rub a lot of you the wrong way, but Empire has always been the weakest of the original trilogy to me. Not from a story or writing perspective, mind you. In fact, if we're looking at these films based on how well written they are, Empire is probably the best in the series. But there's more to a film than just how well it's written. A film like Eyes Wide Shut, for example, is a very well-written film, but I never got into it for reasons outside of the writing. For Empire Strikes Back, I think the first act is fantastic, and the third act is amazing, but the middle of the film is where it starts to lose me for a few reasons. 1. The setting of these scenes aren't very visually interesting. For the scenes with Han and Leia and the others, it's all set either in space or inside of the dimly lit Millennium Falcon, and with Luke, it's mostly set in a dull gray swamp on Dagobah. Neither of these are visually spectacular locations in my opinion. But there's another problem I have with the film. The timeline of events is very confusing. Supposedly, Luke's training on Dagobah and the Falcon evading the Empire and going to Cloud City are taking place at around the same time, but this raises a few questions for me that have always irked me. First, how long was the Millennium Falcon in space evading the Empire? We know the light speed was busted, so it had to have been at least a couple days. Let's be generous and say a week. Then we'll give them about a few days to head to Bespin. How about 5 days? Then let's say they spent 2 days on Bespin and then the stuff with Vader happens. But if this takes place over the same period of Luke's training, that means Luke only trained on Bespin for 2 weeks with Yoda. How could he have learned enough to hold his own against Vader even if Vader was just toying with him? So let's stretch the timeline a bit. The commonly accepted answer among fans and certain sources claim that Luke was training on Dagobah for anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, anywhere from 1 month to 2 months. Now, granted, this gives more credibility to Luke's enhanced powers on Bespin, but it raises another question. How was the Falcon able to evade the Empire for several weeks in space? 3 out of the 4 passengers need food and water. Did they have enough? What about fuel? And they couldn't have spent much time on Bespin because, as Lando says, the Empire arrived shortly before Han and the others did. Why would they wait a week to spring the trap? I think the most I could accept is 3 weeks for both events to be happening at the same time. I know this seems like a nitpick, and yeah, it probably is, but it really does confuse me. Still, if those are my only 2 big complaints about the film, you know it's great. It's just never been one of my personal favorites, and I'm aware I'm in the minority on this one. At number 4, we have A New Hope. A New Hope is the first thing I think of when I hear Star Wars. I think of Leia's ship being chased in the opening. I think of Luke looking out at the sunset. I think of the Death Star trench run and Obi-Wan in the cantina. So many of my favorite things in Star Wars are found in the very first movie. And there's such a low-budget charm to this film. Not that the budget for the film was insanely low or anything like that, but you know the filmmakers put everything they had into the sets, costumes, and props, many of which were repurposed household items like camera flashes. There's a humble energy to the first movie that makes it so endearing to me. With that said, certain elements of the film are definitely a bit dated. You can tell this is a film made in the 70s, from the hairstyles and the abundance of mutton chops. The acting is also probably the weakest of the original trilogy, which is understandable as these actors were still trying to grasp these characters and their personalities. But what keeps this film from being higher up for me is the fact that everything that is done great in this movie, other Star Wars films have done much better. Still, it's probably one of the films I rewatch the most, just because of how much it means to me on a personal level. And speaking of personal choices, bear with me here. Number 3 is The Last Jedi. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Look, I have tried so hard to see this movie through the eyes of people that hate it. I have looked at the criticisms, both reasonable and unreasonable. I have tried my hardest to understand the absolute hatred for this movie, and I just can't. This is a fantastic movie, and it's a fantastic Star Wars movie. The cinematography and visuals are absolutely peak, the acting is great, the story is challenging, and the themes of failure, legacy, and redemption are some of my favorite elements in the entire saga. Now, look, I'm willing to extend an olive branch to those who disagree. When I first saw this movie on opening night, I didn't like it very much. It made so many choices that I just couldn't get behind. And as much as I love this film, there are some choices made that I still do not like. For one, killing off Phasma. I didn't care that they killed Snoke, to be honest. He was quite literally a stand-in for Palpatine. So seeing Kylo take him out to become the new big baddie was a welcome twist for me. But killing Phasma, who is already woefully underused in the previous film, I couldn't stand that. Phasma could have been the perfect overarching villain for Finn. Imagine her surviving and going after Finn personally in the Rise of Skywalker. You would have a perfect dynamic of Finn, who left behind the First Order only to be hunted relentlessly by the ghost of his past. But nope, they kill her with even less screen time. Then we have the whole Resistance on the Run plot, which is fine. It's not particularly engaging to me, but I also don't think the stuff with Holdo deserves nearly the amount of hate that it gets. And the film is probably about 20 minutes longer than it needs to be. But let's talk about the best element of the film for me and the worst for a lot of other fans. Everything with Luke, Kylo, and Rey. I could have been completely satisfied with just a full movie of these 3. All 3 of these actors are putting their best effort into these roles, especially Mark Hamill, who gives, in my opinion, his greatest performance as Luke Skywalker. There's a three-way element to this primary conflict of Kylo wanting Rey to join him, Luke wanting to let the Jedi end with him because of his past failures, and Rey trying to find her place in the galaxy and show Luke that the galaxy needs the legend of Luke Skywalker. And every character has a different perspective as to what led the galaxy to this moment, and it's told wonderfully through the Rashomon-style narrative. And did I mention already that this is probably the most beautifully shot Star Wars movie ever? So many of these scenes are framed with so much care and precision. I could take any one of these frames and hang it on my wall. And above all else, I like this film because it challenged me. It didn't just give me action and spectacle with little substance like Attack of the Clones, and it didn't play it safe like The Rise of Skywalker. It took risks. Not all of them paid off, and I stand by the fact that this is altogether a pretty messy film, and from an editing and narrative perspective, it's probably not the greatest. But the stuff that's good is so good, and the stuff that's bad isn't nearly as bad as other stuff I've seen from Star Wars. Of all the sequels, this is the one I return to the most, and it only gets better for me every time I watch it. Okay, next film. At number 2, Revenge of the Sith. Okay, if you hate that I had Last Jedi up this high, take comfort in knowing that Revenge of the Sith is at number 2 for me. This is easily the most rewatchable Star Wars flick. I can tune in at any time in the film and be fully engrossed in the story. Even as a kid growing up in the 2000s, this was the one film from the prequels that even the die-hard haters agreed was pretty good. And these days, it's hailed as one of the best Star Wars movies ever, with a dark story, surprisingly decent comedy, and by God, this is the film that made Anakin and Obi-Wan feel like brothers. They talk to each other, they make jokes, they have synergy. Attack of the Clones was almost nothing but the two of them fighting and yelling at each other. I actually cared about their relationship in this movie. Partially because the acting in this one is leagues above the last two. And of course, what everyone remembers most about this movie besides the memes is the action and the music. This is probably the best action in any Star Wars movie, with incredible lightsaber duels, an impressive opening space battle, and eye-catching locations for the battles. I think Ewan McGregor and Ian McDiarmid are really the two standout performers in this film, but I also have to give credit to Hayden Christensen as Anakin. Where I didn't get into his performance in Attack of the Clones, I really buy into it here. So, what are my complaints? Well, while the action and effects are pretty great, certain fights are pretty lackluster. Particularly Obi-Wan's lightsaber duel with Grievous that lasts all of 40 seconds, and Palpatine's duel with the Council members. I stand by it, it's absolutely stupid that these Jedi Masters, these Council members, just stand there and let themselves be killed. And don't give me that Force screen BS, it's just a bad scene. And speaking of bad scenes, while this film doesn't have as many bad love scenes as Attack of the Clones, the ones in this are the absolute worst.
You're so beautiful.
Only because I'm so in love.
No, it's because I'm so in love with you.
So love has blinded you.
Turn it off!
There's also a weird time discrepancy thing in this film too. Early in the film when we see Padme, she looks to be about maybe a few months pregnant. Definitely showing, but not ready to deliver yet. But just a few days later on Mustafar, she's looking like she's at least 7 months along, and she's supposed to be carrying twins? Either Revenge of the Sith takes place over several months, or Padme has the gestation period of a fruit fly. Also, because a lot of Natalie Portman's scenes in the Senate and with other senators were cut, and because of her role in this part of the story as an expecting mother, Padme's character really does suffer. Going from a strong-willed, pretty badass heroine in the last two, to a crying, pregnant woman who's constantly worried about something in this film. And the sad thing is, originally, Padme was going to take initiative in the original script, bringing a knife to her meeting with Anakin on Mustafar, ready to take him out if she needed to. And yeah, let's talk about her death. I hate to keep ragging on Padme in this film because Natalie Portman really does a great job, but she got the short end of the stick here. Padme loses the will to live and dies of a broken heart. Now, yes, I am aware that people can actually, in a way, die from a broken heart, but in most cases, it doesn't happen this fast. And for such a strong character like Padme, having her go out this way is kind of insulting. And again, don't be hitting me with your Palpatine drained her life force to save Anakin nonsense. That's a fan theory, it wasn't confirmed, it wasn't filmed, and it didn't happen. And if that were the case, it detracts from Anakin's part of the story because the whole point is that in trying to save Padme, he indirectly led to her death. But I do wish that the film had given more reason to that she's lost the will to live, especially when 2 children, for most caring mothers, would be one hell of a reason to live. Maybe say that when Anakin choked her, it caused some complications or that her head hit the ground too hard. But that's enough complaints, because I still do love this movie. It's dark, it's dramatic, it's fun, and it's almost a perfect Star Wars movie. But not my favorite. My favorite is number 1, Return of the Jedi. If I was only given one Star Wars film to watch for the rest of my life, I would choose Return of the Jedi. This is hands down my favorite of the series. I love pretty much everything about this movie. Even the special edition and Blu-ray changes don't ruin this movie for me. As much as they try. Return of the Jedi not only has the best visual effects of the original trilogy, it has the best score, the best acting, the best action, and it's a fantastic way to cap off the original trilogy. I love the scenes with Jabba the Hutt in his dark and dingy palace on Tatooine. The sail barge scene is one of my favorite action scenes in Star Wars. The speeder chase on Endor, the battle at the shield generator, I love it all. Yes, even the Ewoks bite me. But my absolute favorite element of this movie is the dynamic between Luke and Darth Vader. It's the meat of the story and the crowning jewel in the trilogy for me. Not only are their scenes together tense and emotional, but they're dark and sad. When you break it down, Luke is trying to reach out and save his father, but Vader believes he can't be saved. Essentially, he's surrendered to his dark fate. The duel on the second Death Star showcases the true conflict of Luke battling not only his father, but the temptations of the Emperor. Which leads to my favorite scene in all of Star Wars, where Luke is losing his cool against his father, nearly giving in to the dark side only to reject it after. This leads to Vader's redemption, another great scene, and all the while, the Battle of Endor rages on, leading up to the climactic end where the galaxy celebrates, the Alliance throws a rager with the Ewoks, and Luke burns his father's armor before seeing the ghosts of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin before the film ends. I recognize that Return of the Jedi has its detractors. I know a lot of people hate the Ewoks. I know that most people consider this the weakest of the originals, but for me, this has been, and always will be, the pinnacle of the Star Wars saga. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more Star Wars content in the future. Leave a comment below telling me how you'd rank the movies, and be sure to hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload next. We'll see you next time, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.